Сайн байцгаана уу хүн төлөвчтэй. Өнөөдөр манай de facto нэвтрүүлгийн зочноор Австралийн PM&C гэж группын гүйцэтгэх захирал ноён Иан Ханк оролцож байна.
Иан Ханк, Австралийн PM&C группын гүйцэтгэх захирал. Иан Ханк нь Австрали дахь зах зээл сонгуульд ажлын зөвлөх үйлчилгээ үзүүлдэг 30 гаруй жилийн түүхтэй PM&C группын гүйцэтгэх захирлын албыг харшдаг. Тэрээр стратеги, тактик, бодлогын асуудлуудад зөвлөх хийсэн арвин туршлагатай ба улс, муж, орон нутгийн хэмжээнд дэх 40 гаруй сонгуулийн кампанид ажилд гар бие оролцжээ. Хэвлэл мэдээллийн ба улс төрийн зөвлөхөөр мөн 25 жил гаруй ажилласан байна.
Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you for inviting me onto your program.
Thank you for coming, and please tell us about the company.
My company, PM&C Group, is a strategic corporate communications and tactical communications company. We have a lot of experience in politics, particularly. We give media and political advice to corporations, to NGOs, to business, and we also assist in running political campaigns in Australia. We're aligned more on the conservative side of politics, but in our business we actually will work for anybody whose cause we think is worthwhile.
You said strategic communication.
Exactly, because a lot of people, we try and write for people a plan about the best way to project the image that they want to project, so we work that out based on their values, the values of the company, their personal values, and so on. That is the bedrock on which we work to actually help project a company.
What would be then the net value of at the personal level?
For me?
No, for the people before you give a consulting.
Well, the value is that you can actually put forward and discuss with the public an issue based on trust and values. Some people will just go out and talk about anything. But if you actually have a very good corporate communication strategy and plan, what you are discussing with the people or your audience, it might be shareholders, it might be NGOs, it might be some activist group, is based on values, not just anything you care to say.
Well, it sounds very actual for this country where we have a political campaigns. But, for example, for our last election, the people were not much paying attention to the candidates. They was immediately paid attention to the political party, not because they like this political party in particular, but because they dislike the other one. In particular, the statements they made quite close to the elections.
Well, that just shows some remarkable similarities with my country.
Well, it's way far.
No, because there's a saying in Australia that oppositions don't win elections, governments lose them. And so sometimes when people stop listening to what you actually have to say, because they think either your government is tired, or it has nothing left to say, or it's lost its sense of direction, or the economy might be in a downturn, or so on. There are various reasons why people will stop listening. It's a lot easier for an opposition to then win government. That's not to say that they are without merit, but they've got to make a case still to win. But often, if people stop listening to a government, and this happens in Australia, it's very hard to regain that
So
ground.
what would they do then?
What would a government
Say the opposition one, because the opposition is opposition because the people were not listening or paying attention or respecting them. So the other party is now, let's say, in the power. So what the opposition should do while they are in opposition?
Right. When you're in opposition, this is my personal belief, is that you should take the time to actually think about, one, why you lost, what you need to do to regain the favour of the electorate, what sort of policies you need to do that. Are those policies based on your party's brand, its values, its sense of direction and its purpose? And also think, if we lost after 6 years of government, why did we lose? It's very important to do that analysis. And you do that and then you ask yourself, what do we need to do to actually win the next election? And that next election, maybe, the next election you win might be 6, 8, 10, 12 years away. Sometimes in Australia there are long political cycles. So you've got to ask yourself that question, how will we be relevant at the next election or the election after?
That's the opposition supposed to do.
The opposition must always do that, because even though governments may lose elections and oppositions may get over the line because of that, you still have to have an agenda that can be supported by the public. If you do not have that agenda and a sense of direction and cohesion based on the values of your party, then it's very likely that the electorate will turn on you again.
What brought you to Mongolia this time?
I've been very fortunate to work with an organisation called the International Republican Institute. I started work with them as a consultant in 2008 in Timor-Leste. And so I worked with IRI there on a number of communications programs, working with the government ministers and members of parliament and political parties, trying to improve the way they can operate with their communications and so on. So I went to Timor about 10 times with IRI.
Oh, I see.
And then I've been working in Cambodia as well, doing similar sorts of projects. And I've also worked most recently in Pakistan. And so I was lucky enough, IRI asked me to come to Mongolia to help with a program with LEAD. And so today we've been running some seminars, and I've had some meetings with some of the some politicians, having a general discussion about communications and the direction of the country.
What is that LEAD program about?
LEAD is actually a program which brings people together from various countries. This particular program, we've got Kyrgyzstan, Bhutan and Myanmar. And from each of those countries there's been about half a dozen to 10 people come. And they're people from different walks of life, which is quite good. There's doctors, lawyers, entrepreneurs, but they've all got leadership roles and potential leadership roles in their country. And they come together to exchange ideas about how they can improve the lot of their country, how they can actually support democracies as going ahead, and support civil society. And so it's a very worthwhile program.
Yep. You talk about civil society, and these people are being leaders in their own civil society, kind of. Why civil society is so important? What is this term, particular civil society, where it does come from, and why is that important in the development?
Well, if you've got a strong civil society, you're going to have a stronger democracy. And so therefore, to actually develop civil society means that you can actually strengthen your democracy. Democracies only work when people respect the institutions. And without that respect, then your democracy can be threatened. I'm not saying it'll fall apart.
How to get the people active? How to get the people understanding that democracies work? It depends on you, depends on your participation. What is the best practice to get people understanding and moving in that direction?
Well, part of the program that's been run over the past few days encourages people to get engaged. But I think it's incumbent upon any country's government to encourage participation, to encourage people to get out to vote. Now, part of the way you do that is in a country that has voluntary voting, it's very important for the political parties to get out and talk to their potential electors. Tell them why they should be involved, what's in it for them. If you support our political party, there's going to be a benefit not only for you and your family, but also for the country. So in a system where you have voluntary voting like this, the political parties have got a very important role in actually educating the voters. And so I think the government has as well.
It is in the interest of political parties, while they are running the government, to talk to people, get them involved in what they do.
Absolutely. You've got the greater the transparency that a government has, the better off a democracy is.
That's the missing point in this country about this transparency of the government. Here we find by a lot international measure, this is a lot corruption, and we find the corruption is based, the source is political party financing. How to get these political parties truly reporting their financing?
Well,
how does it work in Australia?
Well, in Australia, we're having a big debate at this moment about financing for political parties. We have, first of all, it's quite different in a way. We have compulsory voting. Everybody has to vote.
Yep, okay.
If you're over 18, you have to vote.
If you don't vote?
If you get fined.
How big?
Now, it's not very big. It's $50. It's a
$50,
token.
but it's quite also money.
It is money which would
either
be,
you
would
vote or pay $50.
Exactly.
Okay.
So we have compulsory voting, which is quite different. We have a good voter turnout.
What is it? 90%?
Voter turnout's probably around about 93%.
Wow. Okay. So because
92.
otherwise you pay $50.
Exactly.
Okay. So it goes.
So we do that, but one of the ways we actually fund our political parties is by public funding. Now, if in Australia you're running in a House of Representatives seat, a lower house, if you get more than 4% of the total vote,
4%.
4%, the government will give you $1.75 per vote to
more than
fund
4%.
your campaign. But you've got to get over 4%.
Okay, minimum.
Minimum.
Those who had, say, 3%
don't get anything.
Don't get any money.
No.
In other countries, they have a bit little money depending on the circumstances.
So it varies, and in the Senate, we get a bit more money. So
let's talk about your structure.
So sorry, just let me finish on the fundraising. So that funds part of the campaign, but we also have private donations as well. And the debate we're having at the moment in Australia is about the level of those private donations and at what level those donations should be made transparent as to who actually made them. At this moment, you can donate $13,500 to a political party.
Okay.
And you don't have to be named.
Okay.
Now, there is a big debate to bring that figure down to a lower number. And there's also a debate going on about constant updates. So if you get a donation, within 24 hours, you've got to update your register and tell people where that money came from.
Okay.
And so that would actually add
24
a lot of
hours.
transparency. Within 24 hours, yeah. That's the debate that's going on at this moment.
So overall, say the ruling party, how many political parties are in the parliament?
In the lower house, where the government is formed, there's 150 seats. And so to form a government, you need 76 seats. The Liberal Party is now in office, and it is in coalition with a party called the National Party. So there are two major conservative parties. Then there is the major opposition party, and that is the Labor Party, the oldest Labor Party in the world. So they are now the formal opposition. And then we have a number of smaller parties. There are the Greens, they've got one representative, a number of independents as well, only about 5.
So Green Party has state finance, they have more than 4%?
If they get more than 4%.
That's
yes.
why they are in there. Which is the threshold of having a seat in the parliament?
Well, we have preferential voting.
Okay.
So it's not first past the post. So if you win, when you go to fill out your ballot paper, you might say 1 for Joe Bloggs, and if he doesn't win outright, number 2 would be Mrs. Joe Bloggs, and so on. And so if you don't get an outright majority, someone else's preference will flow to you until you get enough votes to get across the line.
Oh,
to get
I
50 plus 1.
And you said lower chamber nominates government.
Yes.
What is the upper chamber? How many people?
It's a Senate. In the Senate, we've got 78.
So you have relatively very few members.
Well, the country is 24 million people, and there's about 16 million voters, and we have, this is a federal parliament, we have state parliaments as well. So there's 150 in the lower house and 78 in the
Well, this is fairly smaller. For example, in Mongolia, 3 million people, 76 seats. But the problem here is, out of the 76 parliament members, one quarter. 18 of them can be a minister.
I did see that figure. I think I heard you mention that
Yes.
figure the other day.
What is the difference here? A member can be a cabinet member in your country.
Well, you have to be a member of parliament to be in cabinet.
Oh, I see.
We have a different system of parliament.
Then how about this separation of two powers? One is legislative, the other is executive power, and one guy has both powers. How come it?
Well, it is. We do actually have that separation. Particularly at the moment, where we've got a one-seat majority, and so the executive is answerable to the legislature. It is, so there is a definite separation. The debate goes on.
But I mean, I'm talking about that particular parliament member who is also a cabinet member.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, how he will make a difference? And then with one hand he making legislature, with the other hand his execution. So, like in our country, I will do special legislation, which makes my life easier here in execution.
No. Because of the structure of our parliament and our party system, and the respect that the actual institution of parliament is held within by its members and also the public, that sort of thing really doesn't
work. Okay, then.
And that's these things grow out of a history, out of a culture. It doesn't happen overnight, but our parliament is probably the 5th longest serving parliament in the world, continuously.
Oh, is it? How come?
Well, just because we formed our parliament in 1901, and it's served continuously since then. So I think the US is probably, it would be Britain, then the US would have the next longest serving parliaments, continuously serving.
I mean, how come parliament not to be continuously serving? What do you mean?
Well, sometimes there might be a revolution that interrupts the process of a democratic,
yes, it is.
democratically elected government. It has been known to happen.
Back again, sorry, one question is about the whole party financing. How many % would be from budget of that, and how many will be from the donation?
At the last election, I'm giving you very rough figures, I'd have to check, but at the last election, the two major parties, Liberal and Labor, probably would have got around about 25 million each from the public purse, and the rest of the money was spent by public donation.
Yeah, that would be substantially higher or less?
Oh, no, significantly higher.
Significantly higher. Yeah. If there's a particular ratio regulating, because say you get from budget and then 1,000 times more you receive from the donations.
You're saying that we do favours for people and therefore they return it. That, if you've got the right checks and balances, that doesn't happen. And you've got to have, that's why it's so important to have transparency.
So then I understood, speaking about the transparency, that money is a report, you said even now discussions about to
It's reported too late. What happens is that the reporting process in Australia currently, at the federal level, and it varies from state to state.
It's too late, how long?
Is that it's reported after the election, about 6 months after.
Like Mongolia.
And so we're working at changing that. I think my personal view, and there would be others that would disagree with me, but my personal view is I think the transparency of donations is critically important. I don't believe that donations should be banned. I think they've got to be made very transparent.
Because it is
because you try and ban something, that only encourages people to try and circumvent the law.
So under the table.
And that's not good.
It is here, people, we don't know exactly, they say one statistic that this report donated to a certain level. But actually they have donated big money and we don't know the report. So what is the best way to have this transparency for sure? It is because you give budget money to the political party that you oblige them to report clearly, transparently, everything.
Well, no, it's even before public funding, we actually had to report our donations.
Okay, if something goes wrong or not true, was it any case?
Well, no, there's serious penalties involved if you
reporting
do the wrong thing
in the wrong way.
No, the Electoral Act is
quite
quite
Do you recall any this kind of events in the history?
In one of our states, there was some examples where some politicians were trying to set up a system to get around the donation laws. And they were found out. And we have a thing in one state called ICAC, which is the Independent Commission Against Corruption. And they were alerted to this. They did an investigation. People were fined. They were expelled from Parliament. And some faced prison terms. So there are checks and balances.
So then you talk about this immunity of parliament member.
We don't have immunity.
You don't. So any parliament member can be arrested if the police find this relevant.
Yes. Yeah.
It happens.
Yeah. You'd be charged. We don't have immunity.
Wow. Okay. Impressive. I was also told your parliament member, in particular those who has we call it double del cloth or double head, legislature and executive. Parliament member has to report their foreign trip. Meetings. If a minister was to come here to Mongolia and received a gift from the Mongolian government, he would have to put that gift down on a public register. From private individual? From a government, from a private individual, it doesn't matter. Any gift, I think the figure is over $200, but most politicians put down virtually every gift that they are given now. Okay. Do they report their meetings with different individuals, why they have met, how do they meet? In the federal parliament, no, we do not have that as a mandated thing. You don't have to display your diary of meetings. We do have a register of lobbyists. So if I want to go and lobby a minister or a member of parliament on behalf of another party, I have to write that down on the register, and I have to put down who I'm lobbying for, when I started lobbying for them, the name of all the lobbyists that could be involved in this discussion. And if I don't do that, there are penalties that will apply to me. This lobbying culture is something not identified as lobbying in this country. Right. But that lobbying is happening all around somehow. So how to... If you work in politics, you're going to be lobbied. I think that's almost the nature of it. Yes. You'll be lobbied by the representatives. Yes. The people you represent. Yes. They're going to come and knock on your door. Yes. What are you going to do about this? I want to do something about this. What about the roads? Yes, it's very clear. So everybody lobbies. Yes. So how do you identify as a lobby group and regulate like? Because if you are advocating on behalf of a third party, it's different if I just want to go and represent myself and talk to a politician because I have a particular gripe about the roads or the power or whatever. I don't have to register as a lobbyist. But if I'm working on behalf of another party, either a business, an NGO, or a sports club, anything, I actually have to register and I have to say who I'm working for. As a politician? No, as a lobbyist. As lobbyist, but lobbyist is not necessarily, lobbyist is not that politician, parliamentarian. Lobbyist is somebody who is bringing the interest, talking to the parliamentarian to do certain favor for my proposal. Yes. Okay. Let's talk about a bit role of media. How you think your media is independent? We've got a very independent media, and I know most politicians will say it's far too independent because they don't like being criticised. Then owner of the media, can a politician own on media? There is no rule preventing you in Australia from owning it, but you'd have to disclose that back straight away. In fact, on your register of interests, you have to disclose any ownership you have, shares or That's
companies
what we
or
have
whatever.
here.
But there are no politicians that own media in Australia that I can recall. Now, but your point about the media, we have a very robust media.
Yes.
And it is essential to have a good, strong, robust media if you want to actually have a good, strong, robust democracy.
Yep.
So, yeah, it is very, very robust. And one of the things that we're finding now with it's been happening around the world, as the development of smaller bloggers having a lot of influence.
Yes.
Which is quite a powerful thing. So niche media outlets are actually starting to have more sway now as well.
Mm-hmm.
So the media across the spectrum is playing a role in keeping the government accountable.
And including the social media.
Oh yes, social media is
playing a increasingly important role now.
Well, social media is a very interesting thing because it's a two-way street, isn't it?
Yeah.
if you're a politician, it allows you to actually put your message directly to the people.
And you get the message from the people.
And you get the message from the people. And sometimes that's not a very flattering message either.
Exactly. That's not what you expect.
But that's good. And that's part and parcel of it.
What is your observations on the current level of democracy, people participation, the way how the city works? Though I understand it's very short-term imagination, image. So what is your...
I'm not going to duck the question, but I'm going to answer it in a very broad way. You have an effective, functioning democracy. That is something, you've only had this since 1992. You had a first constitution in 1992.
Yeah, democratic constitutions.
Yes. That is something to be proud of. When you look around the region, Mongolia as a shining light, a beacon of democracy. And if I was a Mongolian, I'd be very proud of that. Now, 25 years on, do you have teething problems?
Which problem?
Do you have teething problems? Do you have problems with your democracy, with the way it operates? Yes. But these things can be resolved, and they can be resolved over time. You're not going to fix it like that. We have not a crisis at home, but because of our constitution, we've suddenly found that about 9 senators are not eligible to sit in the Senate.
How?
We've found that at least 2 members of parliament in the lower house are not eligible to sit because of a catch in our constitution, which nobody had quite understood until it was brought to the fore. And now we have an issue where members who had been elected were actually not legitimately elected.
What happened?
Well, we have this thing called Section 44 of the Constitution, and it says you cannot be a dual citizen if you are going to sit in the federal parliament. And you have to take every reasonable step to actually ensure that you are not a dual citizen. This was drawn up in 1901. Now,
and you found out now.
And we've suddenly got caught by it because someone's done, a lawyer, in fact, did a lot of digging and looked at the history of some of the politicians and where their parents came from, and they realised that their parents had been citizens, even though these people had been born in Australia. Their parents had been citizens of a foreign country, and they'd inherited the citizenship from their parents, even though they thought they were Australians through and
Why
through.
they would inherit? Why they didn't know or what happened?
No, they didn't realise. They thought they were born
How
as
come
Australian
this,
citizens, but they were dual citizens.
But how come a child inherits citizenship?
Well, go and talk to any number of countries that have very strange citizenship rules.
And that's your rules.
And that's the rules of other countries.
Wow.
So you can inherit citizenships in some cases, even though you're unaware of it. My point to you is that even with a democracy that's been functioning very effectively since 1901, there are still always problems to overcome. And I think what's happening with Mongolia is that you've been operating effectively as a democracy, a beacon. You are still having problems that you're going to have to overcome. But this happens over the course of time.
Looks like we will keep facing problems. The important thing is whether we are solving it fast enough or not.
Well, that's a big question, isn't it? Yeah. And often the wheels of democracy grind slowly. And so, it's possible to get impatient, but the major thing is, if there is a problem with a democracy, is to keep shining a light on it and rally support for that change. And that's, again, getting back to what LEAD has been doing, what organisations such as IRI have been doing. It's about empowering people, encouraging people to continue that drive for democracy that you yourself had back in the 1990s when we had the peaceful revolution here. We've got to encourage young people to actually continue to have that enthusiasm and drive.
This program really gives a lot energy, hope, most importantly, technique how to be a leader. So thank you very much for what you are doing and I are doing in Mongolia. And I think it will be a good contribution to, reproving our young generation.
Well, it's been my pleasure. And can I just say one word? I'd like to actually send a word of thanks to my friends at IRI who've been very supportive of me. I'd particularly like to say a good word to Lana, Jessica and Bert, who have been a most helpful team.
All right.
Thank you very much.
We'll see you again.
I hope to be back.
Thank you.
Thank you.
За хүн үзэгчтэй өнөөдөр манай de facto нэвтрүүлгийн зочноор Австралийн PM&C гэж энэ консалтинг компани байна. Энийг гүйцэтгэх захирал ноён Иан Hanke оролцлоо. Баярлалаа.